7 days left. What the hell is this? I whispered, my hands shaking as I stared at the red letters printed across the page. My heart slammed in my chest like it was trying to break free. My knees almost gave out as I dropped into the nearest chair, clutching the paper like it was burning me. Those words kept echoing in my head, pounding louder than the ticking clock on the wall. 7 days left for my son. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far this story travels, because no mother should ever go through what I went through. My name is Evelyn Carter. I have lived long enough to know that life is full of storms, but nothing could have prepared me for the hurricane I was about to face. I had built my world around one thing, my only child, Daniel. He was my pride, my joy, my reason to get out of bed every morning. I thought I had done everything right, raising him, keeping him safe, watching him succeed. And yet here I was, staring at a document that told me he had just 1 week left to live. It was a Monday morning, the kind that should have been ordinary, the kind where you sip your coffee, glance at the sunlight spilling through the window, and get on with your day. But that morning was different. I had grabbed a stack of envelopes from the dining table, bills and insurance papers that piled up like they always did. I tucked them into my bag before heading out, not even thinking twice. Later, when I opened one of them, I found this, a medical file with my son's name on it. My son, Daniel Carter. In bold red letters, stamped across the page, the words that made my blood run cold. 7 days left. I read it once, then again, and again. My eyes blurred with tears, but the words never changed. 7 days. I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling the sharp sting of panic. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. Was this real? Was someone at the hospital trying to warn me? Or was it some kind of sick mistake? I thought about Daniel. He was young, strong, always pushing himself harder than anyone else. He was the kind of man who never admitted when he was tired. He brushed off headaches, skipped meals, and poured his whole life into work. Yes, he had been pale lately. Yes, he had complained about being exhausted. But 7 days left? No, that was impossible. I forced myself to breathe, but the more I tried, the harder it became. I held the paper up to the light, scanning every line. His name, his age, his information, all correct. And at the top, underlined, stamped in red, critical. Who the hell would write this? I muttered, gripping the paper so hard it crumpled in my hand. I wanted to tear it up, throw it in the trash, pretend I had never seen it. But something inside me screamed that this was not just a mistake. Someone wanted me to see this. Someone wanted me to panic. I thought of Marissa, my daughter-in-law. She was in the kitchen that morning, humming as she packed lunches. She smiled at me, offered me a container, and said, "Don't worry, Mum. I've got everything covered." Her words replayed in my head, twisting like a knife. She always seemed perfect, too perfect, sweet, attentive, always caring for Daniel. But now, holding this paper, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Was I losing my mind, or was there more to her than I had ever realized? I slammed the paper down on the table and buried my face in my hands. I wanted to believe it was a clerical error, a joke, anything but what it looked like. But deep down, my gut told me the truth. Mothers know. We always know when something is wrong with our children. And this was more than wrong. This was dangerous. I looked out the window, the city moving on like nothing had happened. Cars honked, neighbors walked their dogs, The world kept turning, but mine had stopped. I was stuck in that moment, gripping a piece of paper that could mean the end of everything I loved. I whispered to myself, "Not my son, not Daniel. I will not let this happen." I didn't know what to do yet. I didn't know who I could trust. All I knew was that someone had placed this in my hands for a reason, and whatever the reason was, I was about to find out. Because if Daniel truly had 7 days left, then someone had just started a countdown, and I was not going to sit back and watch my son die, not without a fight. The words 7 days left would not leave my head. They echoed with every step I took, every breath I tried to draw. By the time I set the paper down, my palms were damp and my heart was racing. I needed answers. I could not sit still while my son's life was hanging by a thread. I tucked the paper back into the envelope and shoved it into my bag. I had to keep it close. My mind ran through the possibilities: a clerical error, a cruel prank, or something more deliberate. None of them gave me comfort. When I got home that evening, Daniel was already there. His tie was loosened, his shoulders hunched, his laptop glowing on the table. He looked up at me with tired eyes and smiled. "Long day, Mum?" he asked, his voice carrying the weariness of someone who had been working since dawn. I wanted to blurt out the truth. I wanted to wave the paper in his face and demand an explanation, but I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I asked gently, "How are you feeling, Daniel?" He rubbed his forehead. "Exhausted. These markets never stop moving. I barely slept last night." My throat tightened. There it was again. The exhaustion, the pale look, the constant stress. He thought it was work. He thought he was simply overdoing it. My mind screamed something darker. Before I could press further, Marissa appeared from the kitchen. She was carrying a tray with 2 mugs of tea. She handed one to Daniel, then turned to me. "Mum, I made chamomile. It will help you sleep," she said with a practiced smile. Her kindness felt off to me now. It was like a mask, stretched too perfectly across her face. I forced a smile and took the mug, though my hands trembled. Daniel sipped his tea without question. He trusted her completely. I watched him drink, and my stomach twisted. I excused myself and went to my room. Once the door was shut, I pulled the paper out again. My eyes scanned the red letters for the 100th time. 7 days left. Critical case. It had his name, his age, his information. Everything matched. It was too precise to be an accident. I decided I needed a second opinion, not from Daniel, not from Marissa, from someone who would tell me the truth without hesitation. The next morning, I called my old friend, Dr. Howard. He had retired from practice a few years ago, but I trusted him more than anyone else in the medical field. His voice was warm when he picked up, but the moment I asked if I could stop by, he sensed the urgency. "Bring whatever it is with you," he said firmly. "I'll take a look." I drove across town, with my hands gripping the wheel so hard they ached. At his house, I handed him the envelope. He adjusted his glasses and studied the document in silence. Minutes passed. Then he looked up at me, his expression grave. "Evelyn, this is not an official hospital record," he said. "The formatting is wrong, the stamp is off, and the signature is printed, not handwritten. This was created to look real, but it is not." I felt my chest collapse. So someone made this. Why would they do that? What does it mean? He leaned back, folding his hands. "It means someone wanted you to believe Daniel has a week left. Whether it is to scare you, manipulate you, or prepare you for something worse, I can't say. But it is not an error. This was intentional. My voice cracked. Who would want to do that to him? To us? He hesitated before answering. You have to ask yourself who benefits if Daniel is gone. The words hit me like a slap. My mind immediately went to Marissa. She had everything to gain. She had access to his meals, his routines, his documents. She also knew about my estate. I drove back in silence, my thoughts circling like vultures. I wanted to confront her right then, but logic held me back. If she was behind this, I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. That night, at dinner, I studied her closely. She laughed easily, asked Daniel about his day, and refilled his glass without him asking. When she turned to me, her voice was soft. Mum, you've been quiet. Everything all right? I swallowed hard. Just tired. Her eyes lingered on me for a second longer than necessary. Then she smiled again, as if nothing was wrong. Daniel hardly looked up from his phone, too busy reading emails. He trusted her so blindly it broke my heart. After dinner, I collected the dishes and carried them to the sink. Marissa followed, standing close beside me. She lowered her voice. You know, Mum, you worry too much, she said, rinsing a plate. Daniel is strong. He can handle more than you think. Maybe it's time you stopped hovering over him. Her words had an edge I hadn't heard before. I froze with a dish in my hand, then set it down slowly. I'm his mother. It's my job to worry, I replied quietly. She gave a short laugh. Worry all you want. It won't change anything. The plate slipped slightly in my hands. I steadied it, keeping my face neutral. She walked away, humming to herself, as if the conversation had meant nothing. But I knew what I had just heard was not casual. It was a warning. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. My thoughts circled endlessly. Someone had forged medical records with my son's name. My daughter-in-law was speaking in ways that chilled me. And Daniel, he was in the dark, trusting the very person who might be pulling him toward danger. I pulled the paper out once more, smoothing its creases. My hands no longer trembled. Instead, they curled into fists. Whoever created this document wanted me scared. They wanted me paralyzed. But I was not going to freeze. If my son truly had 7 days left, then those 7 days would be mine to uncover the truth. I kept the forged document hidden in the back of my drawer, locked away under old bills and photographs. Every time I thought of it, my chest tightened. The words were burned into me. 7 days left. It was as if I had been given a countdown, and every tick of the clock was louder than the last. I tried to carry on with my routine, but nothing felt normal anymore. Even the sound of Daniel's footsteps down the hall made me flinch. I listened to the way he sighed when he sat, the way he pressed his hand against his forehead when he thought no one was looking. I saw the faint color drained from his cheeks. He thought it was long hours at the office, but I knew better. Marissa was everywhere. She was in the kitchen when I woke up, at his side when he came home, smiling, watching, moving with an ease that now felt rehearsed. I caught myself studying every gesture she made. When she poured Daniel a drink, I leaned forward to see if her hand trembled. When she handed me a plate, I wondered if there was something extra sprinkled across the food. One evening, after dinner, Daniel sat at the table working on his laptop. His phone buzzed non-stop with alerts. I sat across from him, staring at his pale face. Daniel, I asked softly, have you had a full checkup lately? He barely looked up. I don't have time for that right now. I just need to get through this quarter. Once the numbers stabilize, I'll take a break. My jaw tightened. He didn't see it, but Marissa did. She leaned against the counter with her arms crossed. "He's fine, Mum," she said, her voice sweet but edged. "You really need to stop pushing him. Stress is part of the job. He's not a child." I turned to her, my eyes narrowing. I know my son better than anyone, and I know when something is wrong. Her lips curved, but there was no warmth in it. "Maybe you don't know him as well as you think." The room fell quiet except for the clacking of Daniel's keys. He didn't even notice the tension building like smoke around us. That night, I sat in my room, staring at the ceiling again. Doubt crept in. What if I was wrong? What if it really was just work and stress? But then I remembered Dr. Howard's face when he held that paper. The stamp was wrong. The signature was printed. It was no mistake. I needed proof. Suspicions were not enough. The next day, I followed my instincts. Marissa left her bag on the chair by the door when she went to take a call outside. I heard her voice drifting through the glass. Her tone was sharp, not the cheerful tone she always used with me. I walked quietly to the chair and opened her bag just enough to peek inside. There was a small notebook with neat handwriting across the pages. I flipped through quickly, my hands sweating. Most of it looked like harmless notes, reminders for errands, lists for groceries. But halfway through, I stopped. There, written in black ink, was a line that made my blood run cold. "Adjust dosage if necessary." My stomach dropped. Dosage. She worked in a clinic. She had access to medications. And now here it was, scribbled down in her own handwriting. I snapped the notebook shut and shoved it back into her bag just as the door opened. She stepped inside, phone pressed to her ear, and looked at me. Her eyes scanned me quickly. I forced a smile and pretended to fix the flowers on the table. She hung up and set her phone down. "Everything all right, Mum?" she asked. "Just making the house look nice," I replied, my voice steady. She tilted her head slightly, as if searching my face for cracks. Then she smiled again, that same flawless mask, and walked past me. That night, I could not sleep. I replayed every detail in my head: the forged medical record, the sharpness in her voice when she thought no one was listening, the words written in her notebook. The pieces were lining up, but they were not complete. If I confronted her now, she would deny everything. She would twist the truth until Daniel believed her, and he would believe her because his love for her blinded him. I sat up in bed, my fists clenched. I needed more. I needed to show him something he could not ignore, something even she could not explain away. The next morning, I tested her. I came into the kitchen earlier than usual. She was stirring something on the stove. When she saw me, she quickly covered the pot with a lid. "Breakfast will be ready soon," she said. I stepped closer. "What are you making?" "Oatmeal," she replied, smiling. "Daniel likes it sweet, so I added some sugar." I lifted the lid before she could stop me. The steam rose, and I stirred with the spoon. On the surface, white granules floated unevenly. They did not look like sugar. I looked at her directly. "This doesn't smell like sugar." Her smile never wavered. "You must be imagining things. Taste it if you don't believe me." I set the spoon down. My voice was calm, but every nerve in my body was on fire. "No, I'll pass." She shrugged and carried on, as if nothing had happened. I walked out, my chest burning with rage and fear. It was not proof yet, but it was close. She was too calm, too practiced. Later that day, I took a quiet walk through the park to clear my head. The laughter of children, the chatter of families, it all felt distant. My world had shrunk down to one mission: protect Daniel. I sat on a bench, staring at the paper folded in my bag. My hand brushed against it like it was a weapon I was carrying. It reminded me that I was running out of time. I whispered to myself, I can't let her win. I won't. When I got home that evening, Daniel was on the couch, asleep with his laptop open. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. Marissa stood over him, brushing his hair back from his forehead. She looked up at me with a smile that sent chills through me. He just needs rest, she said softly. I forced my face into calmness, but inside, I knew rest would not save him, not if she was in control, and I was done being quiet. The night Daniel collapsed on the couch replayed in my mind until I could barely think straight. His pale face, the shallow rise and fall of his chest, and Marissa leaning over him with that calm smile haunted me. I had told myself it was exhaustion, but deep inside, I knew it was something else. I could not push it away anymore. I needed to know the truth. The next morning, I called Dr. Howard again. My voice was low, tight, almost a whisper. I need you to meet me, I said. I have to show you something. He agreed without hesitation, and I drove across town, clutching the paper bag I had taken from the kitchen. Inside were 2 small containers of food from the night before. I had hidden them away before Marissa cleared the table. I was terrified of what we would find, but I had to know. When I arrived, Howard took the bag and laid everything out carefully. He sniffed, frowned, then scraped a bit from the rim into a dish. He rubbed it between his fingers, studying the texture. This isn't sugar, he said flatly. My throat closed. What is it? He shook his head. I can't confirm without proper testing, but it's not anything you should be eating. Evelyn, this could be dangerous. You need to get it analyzed in a lab. The word dangerous rang in my ears. I nodded slowly, gripping the edge of the table. Howard, what do I do in the meantime? Daniel eats this every day. He trusts her. Howard's expression hardened. Then you stop him. Make sure he doesn't eat anything unless you've seen it prepared. And go to the police. Bring them the document and the food. I hesitated. Without proof, they will think I'm paranoid. She will twist it, make me look crazy. I need more than suspicion. He sighed, leaning back. Then watch her closely. And whatever you do, don't let her know you're onto her. I thanked him and left, but my hands were shaking on the wheel all the way home. That night, at dinner, I watched Marissa carefully. She placed Daniel's plate in front of him first, smiling as she set it down. Her nails tapped the edge of the plate for just a second too long. I leaned forward. I'll take that one, I said suddenly. She looked up, startled. What? I'll eat that plate. Give Daniel mine. Her smile flickered, but she recovered quickly. Of course, Mom, if that's what you want. She switched the plates without hesitation. Daniel laughed lightly. Mom, you're being strange tonight. I forced a smile. Just felt like switching things up. I ate slowly, forcing the food down, despite the knot in my stomach. Marissa kept glancing at me, her eyes sharp, even though her lips curved in a smile. Later, I felt queasy, but not enough to collapse. I realized she had not used a heavy dose, just enough to weaken, enough to build over time. It was a methodical plan, steady, patient, cruel. That night, I sat at my desk, the forged medical record in front of me, the taste of the food still on my tongue. My decision was made. I had to protect Daniel, even if it meant playing a dangerous game. The next day, I arranged to meet a lawyer I trusted, Ms. Alvarez. She had handled my estate for years. In her office, Surrounded by shelves of thick binders and quiet ticking clocks, I laid everything out. The record, the food samples, the changes I had seen in Daniel. She listened carefully, then leaned forward. Evelyn, if what you're telling me is true, then your daughter-in-law has both motive and opportunity. She stands to inherit if something happens to Daniel. I nodded, my chest heavy. That's what I'm afraid of. She pulled out a file and flipped through my will. Right now, everything is divided between Daniel and Marissa, but there's a clause. If Daniel dies before you, Marissa inherits his share immediately. That means she gains control over a large portion of the estate. The room seemed to spin. I clenched my hands on my lap. So if he dies, she gets it all. Eventually, yes, Alvarez confirmed. At least his part. And then whatever you leave behind later. I sat back, numb. It was the missing piece I had dreaded. The forged record was not just a warning, it was a setup. Someone wanted Daniel gone. Someone wanted the estate. Alvarez lowered her voice. Evelyn, you have options. You can change the will. You can protect the assets. But you must act carefully. If she suspects, she could move faster. I closed my eyes, taking a long breath. The clock on the wall ticked louder, counting down the 7 days written in red. When I left the office, the city felt colder. The wind whipped through the streets, the sound of horns and chatter blurred in my ears. I walked to my car with a single thought pounding through my mind. Marissa had reason. She had means. And she was already moving. That evening, I returned home to find her sitting on the porch with her phone, her face lit by the glow of the screen. She looked up, smiled, and waved like nothing was wrong. "You're home early, Mum," she said sweetly. "I was just booking us a spa appointment for the weekend. You deserve some rest." Her voice was smooth, her eyes bright, but I saw the calculation behind them. She was waiting, watching, making sure I stayed calm. I forced a smile. "That sounds nice. You go ahead with your friends. I have some things to take care of." She tilted her head, studying me for a moment, then shrugged and returned to her phone. Inside, I dropped my bag and sank into the chair. My body trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what I knew now. She had a motive, a plan, and the patience to see it through. But she did not know I was watching her. She thought I was still the quiet, trusting mother-in-law. She thought I would never fight back. I pressed my hand against the forged record, my jaw tightening. If she believed that, she had just made her biggest mistake. I could not waste another day. Every hour felt like it brought Daniel closer to danger. I had seen enough, heard enough, and now the will made everything clear. Marissa had a reason to push him toward the edge. She had a reason to smile while he grew weaker. I needed to act before time ran out. That morning, I drove back to Ms. Alvarez's office. The weight of the forged record sat heavy in my bag, but what mattered more now was the paper she had shown me the day before. My will, my mistake. When she greeted me, I went straight to the point. "I need to change it. Today." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "That can be done. Do you want to remove her completely or change the distribution?" "Remove her," I said sharply. "I don't want her to have a single cent if something happens to Daniel. I want safeguards in place. If he dies before me, the assets return to me or to a trust, not to her." Alvarez nodded, already pulling out a fresh document. "This will take some time to draft, but it is straightforward. Are you sure you want to move this quickly?" I leaned forward. "I don't have time to hesitate." She studied me for a moment, then began typing. I sat in silence, staring at the wall clock, each tick slicing away at my nerves. By the time I signed the first set of documents, my hands were steady. I felt like I had finally taken one step to protect Daniel, but it was not enough. Paper could not stop poison. On the drive home, I rehearsed what I would say to Daniel. I wanted to tell him everything, but fear held me back. What if he laughed it off, accused me of paranoia? What if he ran to Marissa with my suspicions, giving her the chance to twist the story? No, not yet. I needed proof. Proof that would crush denial. Proof that would make even Daniel see the truth. That evening, I came into the kitchen to him earlier than usual. Marissa was at the counter, sprinkling something into a glass of orange juice. My stomach turned. She looked up, startled, then smiled quickly. "Just adding a vitamin powder," she said casually. "Daniel has been so tired. This should help him." I stepped closer, my voice low. "Did he ask for it?" She tilted her head. "Do I need his permission to care for my husband?" I met her eyes, refusing to look away. Sometimes too much care can be dangerous. Her lips curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. "You worry too much, Mum." I took the glass from the counter and set it in the sink. "He'll drink water tonight." Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She turned back to the stove, humming softly as if the moment meant nothing. But I saw the flicker in her eyes, the irritation she could not hide. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying the way she had sprinkled powder into the glass, the way she had smiled when I questioned her. It was too deliberate, too calm. The next day, I returned to Dr. Howard with another sample, this time hidden in a sealed container. He frowned when he opened it, running a quick test strip across the surface. "It's not sugar," he said again, his voice grim. "I can't confirm without full lab equipment, but this looks like a toxin. You cannot wait any longer, Evelyn. You need the authorities." I pressed my hands together to stop them from trembling. "Then help me. Tell me what to say." He scribbled down a name and a number on a slip of paper. "Detective Carter. He handles cases like this. Take what you have. Do not delay." I took the paper and thanked him, my heart pounding as I walked back to the car. For the first time, I felt like I was not alone. That afternoon, I went to the police precinct. The waiting area smelled of coffee and disinfectant. When I finally sat across from Detective Carter, I laid everything out. The forged medical record, the notebook entry, the food samples. He listened without interrupting, his pen scratching across his notepad. When I finished, he looked up with steady eyes. "You're saying your daughter-in-law may be poisoning your son," he said carefully. "I'm not saying maybe," I replied. "I'm saying she is, and if I don't stop her, he won't make it to the end of the week." He nodded slowly. "We can test the samples. If they come back positive, we'll have grounds to act. But until then, you need to be careful. Do not confront her directly. Let us monitor." My chest tightened with relief and fear all at once. "How long will the tests take?" "A few days. We'll put a rush on it. But it takes time." Time. That was the very thing I did not have. When I got home, Marissa was in the living room scrolling on her phone. She looked up as I walked in. "You've been busy lately," she said lightly. "Just errands," I replied. Her eyes lingered on me for a moment, searching. Then she went back to her screen. But I felt the air shift. She was watching me just as I was watching her. That night, Daniel complained again of feeling drained. He lay on the couch, his shirt rumpled, his face pale. Marissa brought him a glass of tea, but I intercepted it before he could drink. "I'll make him something," I said firmly. Daniel frowned, confused. "Mom, What's going on? You've been acting strange. I forced a smile. I just want to take care of you. Marissa's voice was smooth. She thinks I can't do it. I ignored her and guided Daniel to his room. He muttered under his breath, but he let me help him. I stayed with him until he fell asleep. When I stepped out into the hallway, Marissa was waiting. Her arms were crossed, her expression sharp. "You're crossing a line," she said coldly. I met her stare without flinching. "So are you." For a long moment, we stood in silence, the air heavy with unspoken words. Then she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing through the house. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. The battle lines had been drawn. She knew I was onto her. I knew she was planning something darker. The countdown was still ticking. But now it was no longer just about watching. It was about preparing for the fight that was coming. The tension inside the house grew heavier with each passing day. It was no longer invisible. It pressed against my chest, followed me into every room, and even Daniel began to notice. He asked questions I could not fully answer, while Marissa tried harder than ever to keep her smile in place. The facade was cracking, and I knew it would not hold much longer. The morning after my meeting with Detective Carter, I sat at the kitchen table sipping coffee that tasted like ash. My eyes followed Marissa as she moved around the stove. She hummed quietly, her back to me, her movements calm and deliberate. But every time her hand hovered over a jar or a container, my nerves shot up like sparks. She turned suddenly, holding a plate of eggs. "Daniel likes them soft," she said, placing the plate on the table. Her eyes slid toward me. "Do you want some too, Mum?" "No," I replied quickly. "I'll eat later." Her lips curved slightly. "Suit yourself." The sound of the front door opening made us both look up. Daniel walked in, adjusting his tie, his face pale but determined. He kissed her cheek, grabbed the plate, and sat down. He ate without hesitation, while I clenched my fists under the table. Later that day, I met with Detective Carter again. He called me into his office, a small space cluttered with files and the smell of stale coffee. He shut the door and leaned against his desk. "The samples are being analyzed," he said. "I also spoke to a contact at the medical center. That record you brought me is a forgery, no doubt about it." My chest tightened. "So it's official?" "Yes, but we still need more. Enough that a court can't dismiss it as paranoia or speculation. I suggest you allow us to monitor your home. Cameras, audio, discreet, but thorough." I nodded without hesitation. "Do it." By the next evening, 2 officers arrived in plain clothes. They installed small cameras in the kitchen, the living room, and even the hallway. I watched carefully, memorizing each one, praying Marissa would not notice. When she came home that night, her eyes scanned the room like always. For a moment, I thought she saw something, but she only smiled and set her bag down. "Dinner will be ready soon," she said. The cameras caught everything. I sat in a small office at the precinct the following day, watching the feed on a monitor with Detective Carter beside me. My heart raced as I saw Marissa walk into the kitchen, pull out a glass, and open a small bottle from her purse. She tilted it slightly, white powder slipping into the juice. She stirred carefully, then set the glass aside as if nothing had happened. My hand gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles ached. "There," I whispered. Carter nodded, his face hard. "We need more, but this is a start." That evening, Daniel came home looking exhausted again. Marissa placed the glass of juice in front of him. I was in the corner, pretending to fold laundry, but my eyes locked on the glass. "Drink," she urged him gently. He hesitated, then reached for it. I stepped forward quickly. Daniel, try some water instead. Juice will only make you more tired at this hour. He frowned. Mum, what's with you lately? You're acting paranoid. Marissa's voice was smooth as silk. She worries about you. She means well. I met her eyes, and for the first time, she did not look away. Her smile deepened, but her gaze was sharp as a blade. Daniel sighed and pushed the glass aside. Fine. Water then. Relief swept through me, though I kept my face neutral. That night, when Daniel went to bed, Marissa lingered in the kitchen. I pretended to read in the living room, but I could hear her moving things around. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and cold. You think you're smart, don't you? I looked up slowly. She was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed. What do you mean? I asked evenly. You've been watching me, she said. Her tone was sharper now, stripped of sweetness. Switching plates, throwing out drinks, hovering over Daniel like a hawk. Do you think I don't notice? I set my book down, meeting her glare. If you think I haven't noticed what you're doing, you're the one underestimating me. Her laugh was short, bitter. You're an old woman clinging to control. Daniel is mine now, not yours. He trusts me, not you. My hands tightened in my lap, but my voice stayed calm. He trusts the wrong person. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then she stepped closer, her eyes blazing. Keep interfering and you'll regret it. I stood, forcing myself to hold her gaze. Try me. We stayed like that, neither backing down, until Daniel's voice called from upstairs. Marissa, Mum, what's going on? She stepped back quickly, her smile snapping back into place. Nothing, honey, she called sweetly. Just talking with your mother. I watched her walk away, her footsteps light, her mask back on. But I had seen behind it now. She knew I was onto her, and I knew she was capable of more than I had imagined. The next day, Carter showed me the footage. Marissa's hand sprinkling powder into the glass, her calm expression, her careful movements. It was undeniable. We'll build the case, he said. But you must be patient. If she senses we're closing in, she might act faster. We need her to make a mistake we can't ignore. Patience. That word cut deep. Every day that passed felt like a risk, but I nodded. I'll wait, but not too long. At home, I looked at Daniel sleeping on the couch again, his face drawn and tired. I brushed his hair back, my chest aching. Time was running out, and I could feel it. She was going to strike again soon. The morning started with silence, the kind that pressed against my ears and made my skin crawl. Daniel had already left for the office, his tie crooked and his face pale. I stood at the window, watching his car disappear down the street. My chest ached. Every time he walked out that door, I wondered if it would be the last time I saw him alive. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Marissa entered the kitchen, her heels clicking against the floor. She set her phone on the counter, poured herself coffee, and looked at me with that same flawless smile. Daniel needs rest, she said lightly. You should convince him to take a week off. Stress is a killer. I stirred my own cup slowly, keeping my eyes on hers. Funny. You seem to know a lot about what can kill him. Her smile did not fade. I take care of him. Isn't that what you want? My throat tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. What I want is for my son to live. She sipped her coffee without a word. The silence between us was sharper than any knife. Later that afternoon, I met with Detective Carter again. He showed me the latest footage from the hidden cameras. Marissa had been in the kitchen alone, whispering into her phone. "We can't wait much longer," she said, her voice low but urgent. "The money has to move soon. She's starting to suspect. If we don't finish this, I'll lose everything." My stomach turned. Carter paused the video, looking at me. "She's escalating. We may not have much time." I pressed my hands together. "Then we push her faster. We give her a reason to panic." Carter leaned back. "What do you have in mind?" I swallowed hard. "The will. I'll let her hear me say I'm cutting her out. If she believes her chance is slipping away, she'll act. And when she does, you'll be ready." Carter nodded slowly. "It's risky, but it could work." That night, I staged the first move. In the living room, with the window open just enough for sound to carry, I sat with Ms. Alvarez, who had agreed to help me. "I want the new will signed by the end of the month," I said clearly. 80% goes to the scholarship fund. Daniel will keep control of the company, and Marissa will have no claim." Alvarez nodded, her voice steady. "We can finalize everything soon." I saw Marissa pass by the hallway, her steps pausing just for a moment before she continued upstairs. My chest pounded. She had heard me. The following days, her mask began to crack. She moved through the house with sharper edges. Her words were clipped, her smiles thinner. She cooked meals but lingered in the kitchen longer than usual, whispering into her phone, lowering her voice when I came close. One evening, I found her standing in the garden, phone pressed to her ear. She spoke fast, her tone harsh. "She's going to ruin everything. If the will changes, I get nothing. We need to act before that happens." I coughed loudly to make my presence known. She turned quickly, forcing a smile. "Oh, Mom, I was just talking to a friend about spa reservations." I stared at her, my lips tight. "You should be careful what you say in the garden. Sound carries." Her smile froze for just a second. Then she laughed softly. "Noted." That night, I could not sleep. I sat by Daniel's door, listening to his breathing. Every shallow inhale reminded me of the danger pressing closer. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and found Marissa preparing breakfast again. She sprinkled something into the pan, moving with quick precision. "What are you adding?" I asked. She glanced over her shoulder. "Seasoning. Do you want to taste it?" I stepped forward, picked up the spoon, and set it back down without tasting. "No, Daniel can wait for something simpler. Eggs and toast will do." Her jaw tightened. "You really don't trust me, do you?" I met her eyes. "Not anymore." For the first time, her mask slipped completely. Her eyes narrowed, her voice dropped. "Then maybe you should stay out of the kitchen. Maybe you should stay out of the way altogether." Before I could reply, Daniel walked in, rubbing his forehead. "What's going on here?" Marissa's smile snapped back into place. "Nothing, honey. Your mother and I were just talking about recipes." Daniel looked at me, confused. I forced a calm smile. "That's right. Recipes." He shook his head and sat down, too tired to question it further. When he left for work, I called Carter again. "She's breaking," I said. "It won't be long." He agreed. "We'll be ready. Keep her thinking she's in control. The moment she makes her move, we'll catch her." That evening, I sat at the dining table with Daniel and Marissa. The air was thick, every word measured, every glance loaded. Daniel ate slowly, unaware of the storm circling around him. Marissa kept her gaze on me more than him, her smile stretched tight. Finally, she spoke. "You know, Mum, you can't protect him forever. People get sick. People die. That's life." I set my fork down, my voice steady. And sometimes people get caught. Her smile faded, her eyes flashing. For a moment, the truth was right there between us, naked and undeniable. Daniel looked between us, frowning. "What are you two talking about?" I reached for his hand. "Nothing you need to worry about. Eat your dinner." But inside, I knew the game was almost over. She was cornered. She would strike soon. And when she did, I would be waiting. The air in the house had changed. Every sound seemed louder, every silence heavier. Daniel worked longer hours, leaving early and coming home late, while Marissa and I circled each other like predators, waiting for the other to slip. She had stopped pretending as much. Her smiles were thinner, her words sharper, her patience almost gone. One evening, I decided to push her further. It was time to take the risk. I called Ms. Alvarez and arranged for her to visit. When she arrived, I left the door open just wide enough for sound to carry through the hall. We sat in the living room, papers spread across the coffee table. "I want this signed in 1 week," I said clearly. 80% of the estate will go to the Scholarship Foundation. Daniel will inherit the rest. Marissa is not to be included in any future drafts. Alvarez nodded, making notes. "We will prepare the paperwork and finalize it. Once it's filed, there will be no way to contest it." I leaned back in my chair, my voice steady but loud enough for anyone nearby. "Good. The sooner it is done, the better. I cannot allow mistakes in my family to take everything I built." From the corner of my eye, I saw Marissa at the edge of the hall. She was frozen for a moment, gripping her phone tightly, her knuckles white. Then she turned quickly and disappeared upstairs. That night, during dinner, she barely touched her food. Daniel talked about his office, but she was silent, her fork scraping against the plate, her eyes darting to me every few seconds. Finally, she broke the silence. "So, Mum, any big changes coming up?" I set my glass down slowly. "Yes, some very big changes." Her lips twitched into a tight smile. "I'm sure they'll be for the best." Daniel looked between us, confused. "What's going on here? Why are you two talking in riddles?" "Nothing," Marissa said quickly. "Just women talk." But I saw the way her hand trembled as she lifted her glass. She was unraveling, and that was exactly what I needed. The following day, Carter called me to the precinct. He showed me the latest footage from the kitchen camera. Marissa was standing at the counter, her phone pressed to her ear. "We don't have a month," she hissed. "If she signs that will, I lose everything. We have to move now." My stomach turned as I watched her pace back and forth. She was frantic, her mask completely gone. Carter turned to me. "She's close. We need her to make a move we can catch in public. Somewhere she can't deny it." I nodded slowly. "Then I'll give her the stage." That night, I planned the announcement. A small gathering at the foundation office, journalists invited, donors attending. It would look like a celebration of the scholarship fund, but really it would be bait. The morning of the event, Marissa hovered around me more than usual. She helped me choose a dress, offered to drive, even held my purse as we walked to the car. Her voice was soft, almost pleading. "You're making a lot of changes lately," she said as we drove. "Are you sure you're not rushing into anything?" I stared out the window. Some decisions can't wait. Her grip tightened on the steering wheel, and for a second, her mask slipped again. "You'll regret cutting me out," she muttered. I turned to her, my voice calm. "Maybe, or maybe I'll save my son's life." She glanced at me sharply, then forced a laugh. "You really are dramatic." When we arrived at the foundation office, the room buzzed with chatter. Donors, board members, and journalists filled the space. Cameras flashed, hands shook, voices rose in polite greetings. I stood at the podium, my heart pounding, but my face calm. Daniel was beside me, pale but strong, unaware of the storm about to break. I began my speech, my voice carrying across the room. Today, I want to announce a decision that I have been considering for a long time. 80% of my estate will be donated to create scholarships for underprivileged students. My son will inherit the rest. This is my legacy, and it will not be wasted. Applause filled the room. I glanced toward the back. Marissa stood frozen, her eyes wide, her lips parted in disbelief. Then she moved. She slipped a small vial from her purse, her hands shaking as she tried to unscrew the cap. Before she could reach Daniel's glass, the officers moved in. Carter stepped forward, his badge raised. "Marissa Carter, you are under arrest." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed wildly. Marissa tried to pull away, shouting, "This is a mistake! It's just vitamins!" But Carter held up the vial. "We'll let the lab decide that." She struggled, her eyes blazing with fury. "You set me up! You all set me up!" I stepped closer, my voice steady. "No, Marissa. You set yourself up the moment you decided my son's life was worth less than money." The officers dragged her away as the room erupted in chaos. Daniel stood stunned, his face pale, his eyes fixed on the woman he thought he knew. I placed a hand on his arm, grounding him. The truth was out. The mask was gone. And now there was no going back. The sound of Marissa's screams still echoed in my ears long after the officers pulled her out of the foundation hall. The crowd had scattered in a mix of shock and curiosity, leaving behind a storm of whispers and flashing cameras. I stood beside Daniel, my hand still gripping his arm. He looked pale, stunned, and betrayed all at once. His whole body trembled, as if he had just woken from a dream and realized it was a nightmare. We were escorted into a side room by Detective Carter. He closed the door behind us, shutting out the noise. He placed the vial on the table between us, the liquid inside catching the light. "We've got enough evidence now," he said firmly. "The footage, the forged records, the samples, and what just happened in public. She cannot talk her way out of this." Daniel lowered himself into a chair, burying his face in his hands. His voice cracked. "I can't believe it. I can't believe the woman I married, the woman I thought I loved." I put a hand on his shoulder. "You couldn't have known. She hid it well." He looked up at me, his eyes red. "But you knew. You saw it before I did. How long have you been protecting me, Mum?" My throat tightened. "Since the first sign something was wrong. I couldn't risk telling you until I had proof. If I had come with only suspicions, you wouldn't have believed me." He leaned back, shaking his head slowly. "I probably wouldn't have." His voice broke again. "God, I was blind." Carter's voice cut through the heaviness. "She's at the precinct now. She'll be processed and questioned. But you both need to prepare yourselves. This is far from over. She may try to twist things in court, but the evidence is on our side." I nodded, though my chest ached with a weight I couldn't shake. The truth was out, but the wounds it left behind were deep. That night, back at the house, silence filled every corner. Daniel sat in the living room, staring at the empty couch where Marissa used to sit. The walls seemed colder, the air heavier. I made tea, but neither of us drank it. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "She used to tell me she wanted to grow old with me. She looked me in the eye and said she loved me. And all the while she was planning to kill me." I sat across from him, folding my hands. "Some people wear masks so well we forget they're there." But when the mask falls, the truth is uglier than we imagined. He shook his head, his jaw tightening. How could she look at me every day and still think of money? How could she throw away our life together like that? There was no answer that could ease his pain. I let the silence stand between us. The next morning, Detective Carter called me to the precinct. I agreed to come, though my heart sank as I walked through the heavy glass doors. Inside, the smell of old coffee and paper filled the air. He led me to an observation room. Through the two-way glass, I saw Marissa sitting at a metal table, her hands cuffed, her hair disheveled. She stared at the floor, her jaw set. An officer placed a folder in front of her. Inside were the photos of the forged records, the test results from the food samples, and still frames from the video footage. When they played the recording of her sprinkling powder into the juice, her lips pressed into a thin line. She said nothing. Finally, she lifted her head and spoke. "You don't understand. I didn't mean to kill him. I just needed him weak enough to step aside. He was never supposed to die that quickly." The officer leaned forward. "You expect anyone to believe that? You forged records. You had poison in your bag. You tried to tamper with his drink in front of witnesses." Her eyes flashed with anger. "Because she forced me." She slammed her cuffed hands on the table. "That old woman threatened to cut me out of everything. Do you know what it's like to live under her shadow? To know all the money, all the power would never come to me? I deserved my place." I felt my chest burn with rage as I listened from behind the glass. Her words cut deep. Even now, she refused to take responsibility. She blamed me as if her greed was my doing. Carter glanced at me. "She's unraveling. This confession, even if partial, ties everything together." I stayed silent, my nails digging into my palms. After the questioning ended, I returned home to find Daniel still in the same spot on the couch. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, he looked like a boy again, lost and broken. "She admitted it," I told him softly. "Not everything, but enough." He exhaled, his shoulders sagging. "So it's real. No more doubts, no more lies." I sat beside him, placing my hand over his. "It's over for her, but it's not over for us. We still have to heal." He nodded slowly, though his eyes stayed distant. "Healing feels impossible right now." I tightened my grip. "It will come, one step at a time." That night, as I lay in bed, sleep refused to come. My mind replayed Marissa's words, her twisted logic, her shameless defiance. I realized that this fight was not just about saving Daniel. It was about protecting the truth, exposing the greed that had almost destroyed us. She was behind bars now, but the scars she left behind were ours to carry. The trial date was set quicker than I expected. News of Marissa's arrest had spread through the city, splashed across papers, and whispered about in offices. "Wealthy wife accused of poisoning her husband" was a headline that followed us everywhere. I tried to ignore the stares when I went out, but I could feel them, heavy and sharp. Daniel refused to talk to reporters, burying himself in work even as his body struggled to recover. He stayed pale, his energy low, though the doctors assured me his health would return once the toxins left his system. But it was not just his body that was hurt. His spirit was bruised, his trust shattered. One morning, as we sat at the kitchen table, he pushed his coffee aside and looked at me. "Do I have to face her in court?" I studied his face. "You may not have to testify if the evidence is strong enough, but you should be prepared. She may try to fight this harder than we think." He nodded slowly, but I could see the storm in his eyes. "If I see her again, I don't know what I'll say." Before I could respond, the phone rang. It was Detective Carter. His voice was firm. "Evelyn, the prosecutor wants you and Daniel at the courthouse tomorrow. Preliminary hearing. They want to show strength early." I agreed. My hands trembled after I hung up, but I kept my face calm for Daniel's sake. The next day, we walked into the courthouse together. The hall buzzed with journalists and curious onlookers. Cameras flashed, microphones were thrust toward us, voices shouting questions we ignored. My grip on Daniel's arm tightened as we pushed through the crowd. Inside the courtroom, the air was colder. Marissa sat at the defense table, dressed in a neat suit, her hair tied back, her face carefully composed. For a moment, I almost saw the woman Daniel had once loved. But then her eyes met mine, and I saw the fire there. Anger, not remorse. The judge entered, and everyone rose. Once seated, the prosecutor began presenting evidence. The forged medical records were displayed, the toxicology reports from the food samples, the footage of Marissa pouring powder into Daniel's drink. Each piece hit the room like a hammer. When the video played, a murmur swept through the audience. Marissa sat still, her lips pressed together, her hands folded tightly in front of her. The prosecutor's voice was sharp. This was not an accident. This was not carelessness. This was a deliberate act to weaken her husband and ultimately secure financial gain. The defense attorney stood, his tone smooth. "These recordings are out of context. My client was concerned for her husband's health. She added supplements to his food. As for the will, suspicion does not equal proof. She did not need to harm her husband to be financially secure." I clenched my fists. Lies rolled off his tongue so easily. Then the prosecutor called me to the stand. My legs felt heavy as I walked forward, but I kept my head high. I swore the oath and sat, my hands folded in my lap. "Evelyn," the prosecutor asked, "when did you first suspect something was wrong?" I explained everything clearly. The forged record that appeared in my papers, Daniel's decline, the food that tasted off, the notebook entry I had seen. My voice stayed steady, even when my throat ached. "Why did you not confront her immediately?" he asked. "Because I knew she would deny it," I said firmly. "I needed proof. My son's life was at stake." The defense attorney rose. "Mrs. Carter, you admit you never actually saw my client poison your son directly. Isn't it possible you misinterpreted her actions due to your distrust?" I looked him in the eye. "I saw enough, and the cameras saw what I didn't." He tried again, but his words slid off. The evidence was too strong. When I stepped down, Daniel reached for my hand. His grip was cold, but steady. The next witness was Detective Carter. He laid out the chain of evidence, each step supported by lab results and recordings. His testimony was clear, professional, undeniable. Finally, the judge turned to Marissa. "Do you wish to speak?" She stood, smoothing her jacket, her face calm. "I loved my husband," she said, her voice soft. "Everything I did was for him. He worked himself sick. I tried to help. The rest is misunderstanding, twisted into something it's not." Her words rang false, hollow. Daniel lowered his head, his shoulders shaking. The prosecutor stood again. "Love does not forge medical records. Love does not hide vials of arsenic. Love does not profit from death." The judge called for recess, and the gavel struck. The room buzzed as people rose, but my eyes stayed locked on Marissa. For just a second, her mask slipped. She glared at me, her eyes sharp and cold, and mouthed the words, "This isn't over." A chill ran through me. Outside the courtroom, Daniel leaned against the wall, pale and shaken. "She still thinks she can win," he whispered. I touched his arm. "Let her think it. The truth is stronger than her lies." But inside, I knew the fight was not finished. She would not go down quietly, and we would have to be ready for whatever came next. The courthouse felt colder the next morning. The trial was moving faster than anyone expected, and the prosecutor had made it clear this day would be crucial. Daniel and I walked through the front doors side by side, but I could feel how heavy his steps were. He was forcing himself to be here, and I knew the sight of Marissa would break him a little more each time. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. Marissa sat at the defense table, her back straight, her eyes forward. She wore a dark blazer, her hair neatly brushed, her expression calm. But I knew that look. It was the mask she had perfected for years, the one that hid her ambition and her rage. The prosecutor began by calling Daniel to the stand. My heart clenched as I watched him walk forward, his face pale, his hand gripping the railing for balance. He swore the oath and sat down, his eyes flicking once toward Marissa before locking on the prosecutor. "Daniel," the prosecutor began, "can you tell the court how your health had been over the last several months?" Daniel nodded. His voice was low but steady. "I was tired all the time. I had stomach pains, headaches. I thought it was stress from work. My wife told me it was normal, that I just needed to rest more. So I trusted her." The prosecutor leaned forward. "And who usually prepared your meals?" "My wife," Daniel said quietly. "She insisted on it. Every lunch, every dinner. She told me eating out wasn't safe, that she wanted me healthy. And did you ever notice anything unusual about the food or drinks?" Daniel hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Sometimes it tasted bitter. Sometimes the juice looked cloudy. But when I asked her, she laughed and told me I was imagining things, and I believed her." His voice cracked at the end, and I felt tears sting my eyes. The prosecutor gave him a moment, then continued. "Daniel, when did you begin to suspect something more was happening?" Daniel's hands gripped the arms of the chair. "The night I collapsed on the couch. My mother was there. She started taking my meals, throwing away drinks she didn't trust. That's when I realized she saw what I couldn't. I had been blind." The defense attorney rose. "Mr. Carter, isn't it possible your mother overreacted? Stress can cause fatigue and nausea. You're a busy executive. Couldn't this all be coincidence?" Daniel turned his head slowly, meeting the man's eyes. His voice was firm. "Coincidence doesn't put arsenic in my food." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The defense attorney tried to speak again, but the judge cut him off and instructed him to sit. When Daniel stepped down, he walked past Marissa. For a moment, their eyes met. She gave him the faintest smile, almost daring him to believe she was still innocent. He looked away and came back to sit beside me, his shoulders trembling. Next, the prosecutor played the recording of Marissa's phone call. Her voice filled the courtroom, cold and sharp. "We can't wait much longer. If she signs that will, I lose everything. We have to act before that happens." The room was silent, except for the sound of her own words echoing back at her. Marissa shifted in her seat, but her face stayed composed. Finally, the prosecutor stood tall. "Your Honor, we request that the defendant herself be questioned before the jury. Her motives, her actions, and her words speak for themselves, but hearing her denial in contrast to the evidence will make it clear where the truth lies." The judge agreed. Marissa rose, smoothing her jacket, and walked to the stand. She swore the oath with a steady voice and sat down, folding her hands neatly. The prosecutor's questions were direct. Did you forge medical records in your husband's name? No, she said smoothly. I never touched those papers. I don't know who made them. Did you add substances to your husband's food or drinks? I added vitamins and supplements, she replied. He was exhausted. I wanted him strong, that's all. Did you, on the phone, admit that if your mother-in-law signed a new will, you would lose everything? Her jaw tightened, but she forced a smile. That was taken out of context. I was upset. I didn't mean it literally. The prosecutor leaned forward. What did you mean then, when you said you had to act before that happened? She paused, her lips pressed tight, then said softly, I meant I needed to talk to my husband before decisions were made that could affect our lives. Nothing more. The prosecutor held up the vial. And this, vitamins too? For the first time, Marissa's composure cracked. Her eyes flicked to the vial, then to the jury. I don't know where that came from. Her voice shook, just slightly, but enough. When the questioning ended, she was escorted back to her seat. I saw her jaw clenched so tightly it looked like it might break. She would not admit guilt. Not fully, but the walls were closing in. After the session, the judge called for a recess. Daniel and I stepped into the hallway. He leaned against the wall, his hand pressed to his forehead. She lied right to their faces, he whispered, and she almost got away with it. I touched his arm. Almost. But not anymore. He looked at me, his eyes filled with pain, but also with something else. Resolve. I want to see this through. I don't care how long it takes. She has to pay for what she did. I nodded. And she will. As we walked back into the courtroom, I glanced at Marissa one last time. Her eyes locked on mine, burning with fury. She mouthed something I could not hear, but I understood the message. She was not going to surrender quietly, and I was ready for that. The final day of the trial came with heavy skies. The courthouse steps were crowded again, reporters waiting with their cameras and microphones, but I walked past them without slowing. Daniel was beside me, calmer now, his face pale but stronger than before. Inside, the air was thick, every seat filled. People wanted to see how this would end. The judge entered and the room quieted. The jury had reached a verdict. My hands rested on the wooden bench in front of me, fingers pressed tightly together. I turned once toward Daniel. He gave me a small nod. The foreman stood. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of attempted murder and forgery. Gasps filled the room. My chest loosened for the first time in weeks. Daniel let out a slow breath, his shoulders dropping. Across the aisle, Marissa sat still, her hands clasped, her lips pressed in a thin line. For a moment, she looked like stone. The judge's voice was steady. The defendant is sentenced to 20 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 15. The court is adjourned. The gavel struck, and the sound echoed through me. It was over. Officers moved to escort Marissa out. As she stood, her eyes met mine. For the first time, I did not see defiance. I saw something else. Regret. Her lips trembled as she whispered, I never meant for it to go this far. I held her gaze. But it did. For a moment, I felt the sharpness of anger in my chest, the memory of the fear she had caused. But then another feeling came, quieter, but stronger. Pity. She had destroyed her own life with greed, blinded by ambition that had cost her everything. As the officers led her away, Daniel leaned toward me. Do you hate her, Mum? I looked at him carefully. No. Hatred would keep her in our lives forever. I don't hate her. I only hope she learns something from this. He nodded slowly, his eyes lowering. I don't know if I can forgive her. You don't have to today, I said softly. Forgiveness isn't for her, Daniel. It's for you. When you are ready, you'll let go of the anger. Until then, justice has been done. We left the courthouse into the open air. The sky had cleared, a hint of sun breaking through. The crowd was still there, shouting questions, cameras flashing. But I felt lighter. My steps were steady. The days that followed were quieter. Daniel returned to work gradually, his strength coming back as the doctors monitored his recovery. He spent more time at home, sitting on the porch with me, sometimes talking, sometimes silent. The house felt different, lighter without Marissa's presence. It was no longer a battlefield. It was home again. One evening, Daniel turned to me. Thank you for not giving up on me. I should have listened sooner, but you never stopped fighting. I smiled faintly. That's what mothers do. We keep fighting, even when no one believes us. He looked away, the sunset reflecting in his eyes. Do you think I'll ever trust again? I touched his hand. Trust isn't gone forever. It just takes time. And the right people. He nodded, silent, but I could see hope starting to return. As for me, I kept my promise. I finalized the scholarship fund, signing the papers with Ms. Alvarez by my side. 80% of my estate was locked into a foundation that would support students who had nothing. It was a way to turn pain into purpose, to make sure what we had endured created something good for others. On the day of the signing, I felt a weight lift off my chest. The money would not divide us, it would heal others. That was my victory. Marissa faded into the distance. She was no longer the shadow in our home, no longer the threat hanging over our lives. She was simply a woman who lost herself to greed and who would live with the consequences of her choices. I thought about her words often. I never meant for it to go this far. Perhaps that was true, but choices have consequences, and justice had been served. Daniel and I sat together that night, the house quiet, the air calm. We had survived the storm. We were scarred, yes, but we were still standing. And for the first time in months, I allowed myself to breathe without fear. Justice had come. Forgiveness would follow in its own time. Hope was ours again. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. Do you believe forgiveness is possible after such betrayal, or do you think justice is enough? Share your thoughts in the comments and let me know where you're listening from. Your voice matters here. Ban có muốn tôi viết thêm đoạn tương tác này trực tiếp gắn liền với giọng kể của nhân vật chính hay để tách riêng như một lời nhận của kênh?